Logically, I believe the place to start our exploration of the British Isles is with the largest of the two countries, the United Kingdom, also known as the UK. There are about 64.5 million people who live in the UK. It's a multi-ethnic, multi-linguistic society, although English is spoken nearly everywhere by nearly everyone. There are 4 major regions. Each operates somewhat independently of the others within the United Kingdom. Each of these 4 regions is associated with an ethnic group and, at least historically, a language. Here's what they are. England, which is of course associated with the English and the language English. It is from there that this language was propagated throughout the world and has become the global language on planet Earth today. Wales, which is associated with people who are known as the Welsh. The language they originally spoke was Welsh, which is a Celtic language. Scotland, which is associated with the Scots. Originally, they spoke Scottish, another Celtic language. And Northern Ireland, or Ulster, the people there are Irish, at least some version of Irish. Originally, they spoke a language called Irish, which is also a Celtic language. However, we are all aware, Great Britain, the British, the English, whatever term you want to use for these people, traveled throughout the world and conquered large swaths of the planet during the colonial era. Now, no one begins an empire thinking it's going to end, but it ended. And when it ended, people from the places they had conquered began to migrate into the United Kingdom from East Asia, Southeast Asia, South Asia, the Middle East, Africa, the Caribbean. What that has done is it has added significant diversity to what was already a multi-ethnic, multilinguistic society. I will tell you, frankly, that diversity has not been accepted by everyone in the United Kingdom. Let's see where these 4 components are. England makes up the southern 2/3 of the island of Great Britain, but not that peninsula off to the left, to the west. Scotland is the northern 1/3 of the island of Great Britain. Wales is that peninsula I just mentioned. And Northern Ireland is the northern 6 counties of the island of Ireland. The Industrial Revolution began in England in the 1750s. It really helped create a global empire, in many ways, great global empire. Without the Industrial Revolution, it is difficult to imagine that England and the United Kingdom would have come to the power and had the prowess that they once had. The Industrial Revolution basically can be defined like this. It's an increase in manufacturing jobs, a decrease in agricultural jobs, and an emphasis on larger market areas. Let me explain that a little bit. Most people in the 1750s in the UK were farmers. Not just most, but 90%. Today, the country's demographics are basically opposite. 90% of the people live in cities. This is because of the Industrial Revolution. The British, as I told you before when I spoke about India, were interested in trading with everybody. What they did was they began to manufacture things in their factories and trade them throughout the world. In order to support those factories, they needed workers. People began to leave the farmland, move into the cities, take those newly created manufacturing jobs, and at the same time produce things that were then sold throughout the world. Prior to this, most manufacturing on the planet was actually done in what's called cottage industries, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's done in your cottage. So what that means is you would have a workshop in the back of your house, and you were the blacksmith of the town. People would come when they needed something, and you would make it for them. Now, occasionally what would happen would be this. If you lived up in York in the northern part of England and you were the blacksmith and somebody was riding through town on a horse and their horse threw a shoe, they would find you, you would put the shoe on the horse and the horse would take off. And the horse eventually ends up in London. You weren't manufacturing and then attempting to sell horseshoes in London. You just sold to your local community. But it happened to be that that one single horseshoe made it to London. This is what cottage industries were about. They were about manufacturing things and then selling to the local community. With the Industrial Revolution, that began to change significantly. As people moved into the cities, of course, the cities began to grow. This brought about, for the first time in human history in any large way, this process known as conurbation, which is the grouping together of cities due to massive urban growth. At the time of the Industrial Revolution, London had less than 100,000 people in it, and Westminster, which is what most people are familiar with, it's where Big Ben is at, and Westminster Abbey and the Houses of Parliament are at, had maybe 10,000 people in it. To go from London to Westminster, you walked out through farmland at that point. If you think about Southern California, all of these little cities have all glued together over the top of the farmland that once dominated the landscape here. Even when I was a child, there were strawberry fields and citrus fields and dairies all over the place in Southern California. They are essentially gone and have been paved over. That's what conurbation is about. This really begins in a large way in modern human history with the Industrial Revolution in England. However, this also brought about horrible conditions in the cities. And the British were thinking out. They were thinking in advance. One of the things they did to make the city somewhat livable was they began to create what were called green belts. These were large open areas that were set aside in and around the city that were not allowed to be developed as the city grew outwards. Eventually, these have become mostly very large parks. If you're familiar with Central Park in New York City, this is a version of that because the British figured out, maybe for the first time in history, that we spent most of history wandering around in open spaces, and we don't do well living like rats in confined conditions. So setting aside open areas like parks was good for us psychologically. And this is what they began to do. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, though, towns were small. You look on the left-hand side and you see York. What do you see? Take a close look at it. The three highest structures you see are all religious structures. That was common before the Industrial Revolution because the church or religion played a huge role in the lives of the individual on a daily basis. As a result of that, the highest structures, the biggest structures, were religious structures. If you look on the right-hand side, this is Stratford. You can see that's a pub. This is where people congregated. Now, they still do that today, but life was much smaller. It was much closer back then. And then the Industrial Revolution happened and the cities grew. Now, if you look at this map of central London, all of those green splotches you see all over it, these are all parks. They were set aside on purpose as the city grew so that people would have open space. Because in a way, it kind of clears your brain out to be out in a park and walk around and see a squirrel go up and down a tree and kick a soccer ball and watch the stream go by and put your feet in grass. It's a healthy thing for you. Well, the cities grew like crazy as a result of the Industrial Revolution. And as the cities grew, the British understood that it's healthy to have some open space. This is central London. That's the Thames River. That's the Tower Bridge right there in the foreground. You see this all over the place when you're walking around in London. You walk into a park and there's people just chilling out, taking a seat. Now you have to pay for those chairs. I'll just tell you that. So if you sit down in one, you're going to have to pay for it. The person comes over very quickly and makes you pay. I don't know where they come from, out of the trees, whatever it is, but they make you pay. So the chairs are sitting around, but they're there so that you can kind of relax. because they know it's good for you. And look at that guy. He's not out for a casual stroll. This is a businessman, or he works in a bank or something. But they know that it's healthy for you to get out and be away from it being the work. I told you that it did, the Industrial Revolution that is, support the growth of a global empire. Wherever the British went, they took things. Now, archaeologically, this is no longer okay. But when Europeans were traveling around and they were conquering big chunks of the world and they found ancient ruins, in a lot of cases they took them. Well, the British Museum houses lots of this stuff. And in fact, many of these countries they've taken these things from want it back. But there is no sign that they are going to give any of these things back. And you know what? There's an argument for them not doing it. Because we know that, for example, this is part of the Mesopotamian Egyptian wing of the British Museum. The British plundered this stuff. At the same time, what would have happened if some of these things would have been in the museum in Mosul when ISIS got in there? They would have gleefully filmed themselves with sledgehammers destroying it. So there's an argument to a stable place holding on to it. I don't know that it's necessarily a great argument, but there is an argument for it, because at the end of the day, let's face it, this is not Babylonian art or Egyptian art. It's not French art. It's not American art. It's human art. We as humans created this stuff. It is the legacy of us on this planet, and no one has the right to destroy it. One of the things when you walk into the British Museum that you see, one of the first things is the very famous Rosetta Stone, which is carved out and written in Greek, Egyptian hieroglyphics, and Demonic. It was this very object that allowed Egyptologists to begin to decipher the hieroglyphics and read what was written in ancient Egyptian about the pyramids and about the lives that those people led. If you look at it carefully, look at that. That's Demonic on the top and Greek on the bottom, because there were many scholars who could read ancient Greek. As a result of that, it was able to be deciphered. Magic. Absolute magic.